You have Sin, which is the hatchet. Some of these have corruption on them, or sorry, defile on them. Defile is a new kind of passive thing that is changeable that will allow you to do 2% more damage per debuff on the target with 5 stacks of max. So this is like invigorated punishment basically, but instead of punishing people for having buffs, you're punishing them for having debuffs. So it's kind of like a win more situation, but if someone is debuffed, which is very, very often, you'll be able to do more damage. So generally, defile seems good. Unknown if you're going to be able to get it on other weapons, but if you were able to get this on other weapons, it would be something I think a lot of people considered. So Sin the Hatchet has this corruption effect, so debuffs last 25% longer, works on both weapons. The thing here that's like kind of weird is that if you have debuffs that are applied by or if you have a debuff that you apply and then an ally applies a debuff, that's the same one. The one that was applied the most recently will override the duration. So basically, this is useless if another ally applies the same kind of buff. But if you're in a spot where you're the only one applying a certain kind of buff, then it's actually pretty good. So I think it's a spot where, like, if you were to like rate this on like a star system, like 1 star would be like never used, like 2 would be like occasionally used, or like like rare kind of thing, like wouldn't be used very often. 3 would be like it's mid, kind of like it's used a bit but it's not meta defining. 4 is good, and then 5 is broken or something like that. Sin would be probably around a 3 to 4. I'm more so leaning to 3. Just because of the way that debuffs work, and just because you're generally not caring about your debuff duration for most modes. Most people would rather go an artifact that allows them to do more damage rather than provide more utility, but it is interesting to see how that will work with some weapons. Like, for example, with VG, you could go VG Hatchet, then you have Disease on both weapons, you have Rens on both weapons. That would just be generally like a decent strategy. Venom, this is a spear artifact. Defile is a new perk. It's a new perk option that they're adding. I don't know if it's something that you can naturally get, but it's something that is present on some of these artifacts, on multiple of these artifacts, and it's relatively good. I also don't know what Defile stacks yet because it's on certain things, so. That's only on the hatchet though, right? I don't know why they mention it under the hatchet if it's a perk. It is like it's also on a couple other pieces that I've seen, like it's on the Amulet, I believe, Defile, so it's not unique to the hatchet. So it might be like a new thing that they're adding to the game, but that is kind of yet to be discussed. We have Venom. This is a spear. It makes it so that your heavy attacks with either weapon cause poison damage, dealing 20% more damage for 5 seconds. This seems niche. At first when I looked at this, I was like, oh my gosh, you could use bow. But the problem with bow is that your attacks inherently... Oh shoot, I just got rid of everything, didn't I? Your attacks with bow will not get that much value. So this one here was like a 3 because they're not actually heavy attacks, they're just light attacks that won't apply it. So you're basically looking at heavy attacks on a spear or a different weapon. Like you could do this with greatsword maybe, but it would be like really, really stretching it. I think this is like a 2 where it's going to be like incredibly niche and not really used that much at all, unfortunately. I actually should probably put these on the left side because it'll be easier to see. So like the hatchet was a 3, the spear was a 2, and I just don't think it's like going to really be used much at all. That'd be fun with bows, but I've heard both heavies aren't coded as heavies. Yeah, they're coded as light attacks. Maybe it's a new thing. Maybe it's just a filler perk for the video. Yeah. And in terms of like images for these, this is what Venom looks like so far from what we've seen. So it's like super, super reliant on heavy attacks, but doing heavy attacks with spear is really, really sus unless you're going for a coup de grace. And then for Sin, Sin has a few other perks that are good on it. This Defile perk is interchangeable, but the thing that's like interesting here is you could go a utility sort of hatchet here, drop the Defile, and then you go for like social distancing or something like that. So you have options. So Sin, decent. Venom, probably not going to be used very often. Tempest Fury as a Greataxe has momentum. Successful attacks gain 3% movement speed for 3 seconds. Works on both weapons and stacks up to 10 times. This Greataxe is inherently built to be used with Whirlwind. It's very, very obvious. The devs have said it in past videos. The problem is Whirlwind just sucks. Like, even if they buff it, like with Endless Spin, where Whirlwind spins an extra 10 times, it doesn't work very well, because Whirlwind has a 50% base damage mod inherent to the ability, or not base damage mod, it has a 50% ability mod. So what that effectively means is that you would need to have 100% base damage for Whirlwind to do as much damage as a normal auto attack. So Whirlwind's never going to be good until that 50% is up to like 75% or like something like a lot more significant than 50%. It's like you're hitting a target that's completely warded to you for every single hit. So Whirlwind just doesn't do damage. And this is not going to solve that problem because you're going to hit the Empower cap. Fortify Whirlwind literally doesn't matter. You're going to go over the Empower cap with this. You're going to go over the, well, not going to go over the Fortify cap, but you'll be very, very tanky. It's just like, it doesn't matter. It's like a good way to live, but it's not a good way to actually do damage. And for that reason, I don't think this is going to be used that much. It's like a very fun artifact, but I still view this as like being like kind of a 2 on a rating scale. Like where this is a 3, this is probably a 2, this is probably a 2. Like it will be nichely used, but just kind of for fun off the beginning. But I don't think it will be used that much at all. Like you could probably go on to say this is even a 1. Like I don't think this is going to be used basically anywhere. It needs grit. Yeah, you also don't have grit, right? So it'll just get stunned out of it. Like it doesn't really quite work yet. Nature's Wrath, this is a medium chest that I don't believe we have the image of yet. It has Nature's Blessing. Empower expires 200% faster, but you deal 20% more damage. This 20% more damage, I assume, is base damage. You lose your Empower stacks faster, but you deal 20% more damage. Is that good? I think it's good with the Greataxe build, but I don't think it's really good with any other build. If you have builds that have passive Empower, it's decent. So, like, what I mean by this is, like, you have 7% in power from your Honing Stone, right? You have like 7 to 8% in power from going like slash damage on your ring or something like that. Like if you had that and you were in Oblivion, you'd have an additional 15. Like all those are like endless duration kind of empowers. And if you have a way to stack all of that, like maybe it's useful, but I think it's probably just going to make it too hard to get your empower up and it just won't be worth it. So I don't think it's just going to be great. But Whirlwind has grit. I mean, it has grit, but it doesn't have stun immunity, right? So you're just going to get stunned out of it. Someone's going to Warhammer you. It's just not going to work out well. Like, one dude Warhammers you, your entire Whirlwind combo is just not working. And that's just too common in PvP. But within PvE, I guess it's okay. But then you just don't have damage. Like, why do you need movement speed in PvE? You just don't. So, like, there's not, like, a really good spot for it unless you're, like, trying to Whirlwind down a healer for some stupid reason. Or you're trying to replace it for charges and escape ability. But, like, even then, like, you wouldn't run that Greataxe, you'd run something else, so it just doesn't make sense to me. So this, like, I think could be niche. It has some potential, but I don't think it's gonna be experienced that much. Like, there's just better artifacts to go for at this point. The biggest bright side of this is like the first source of armor that has a significant base damage buff, which I think alone will make this a little bit better, which is why I'm probably gonna I'll probably be aggressive here and give it a 3. Like, I think it will be used somewhat, and some people will figure out a way to use it just because it's, like, one of the only armor facts that gives you a damage buff. And just because it does that, like, some build will probably try to make it work. You could, like, argue that you go for tumblers, but, like, not every build could use tumblers super effectively. Like, if I'm a musket, this is, like, a fine thing to go. Like, you just add more base damage. You're probably not going to have consistent power uptime anyway. Like, it's just a fine artifact to go, and it'll just increase your damage overall. Gilly's Gravity Gauntlets. Ironheart is the only one that has a chance to be used by war players. Yeah, we'll get into that in a second. Gilly's Gravity Gauntlets, this is a heavy glove. I think we have a picture of this. Whenever you take damage, gain a charge that increases the damage of your next attack by 3 seconds, a max of 10 charges. The interesting thing here is it Empower or is it base damage? Judging by it's a charge-based system, this is very likely Empower. Just because there's no base damage no base damage effect in the game that has a charge-based system that actually exists. So this is likely Empower. And is 30% Empower really that good if it just only works once? Probably not. I could see this being okay for PvE for getting hit by a bunch of mobs, or if, like, say this procs off every single tick of Ice Storm. Like, then it will be up, like, a decent amount more, but I don't think it's going to be used that much, just because Empower is kind of too hard to come by. Usually, if you're going for, like, a heavy gauntlet, like, I would expect people to go for Tumbler Feet Wrap. Like, it just has the Fortify, it has the Empower on it, has a heal on there. There's, like, no reason to not go for that for a lot of medium players. And I think if you're a heavy player, you're generally not building as much for the damage, but, like, I could see some people with low base damage classes, like, finding a way to use this maybe, but you have to be, like, borderline tanking with it, which I don't think works for most classes. Like, Flail, like, if you really wanted to do damage, this would be okay, but I don't think it generally works. I think it'll be experimented with, though, so I'll give it a 2. Again, where 5 is the highest rating here, and then going down from there, so, like, I don't think many of these artifacts are going to be super, super impactful so far. Blood Drinker and Nature's Wrath. You could well, if you do Blood Drinker with Nature's Wrath, then it'll offset each other, but you still won't get the advantage of that in power. And like the way that New World works in terms of the damage system, you want to maximize as much of those categories, right? Like you have your skill modifier, like which is the thing that Whirlwind lacks, and then that's multiplied by your base damage. That's multiplied by your empower. That's multiplied by a few other effects. And like you just want these effects to be as big as possible. So if you're like decreasing these effects in any way across the board, you're just going to decrease your damage because you won't be able to take advantage of that compounding effect. Like if you really want to optimize your damage in New World, these are kind of the things you control. You can control. You want this in power to be at 50% basically all the time. This to be as high as possible. This for it to be as high as possible. And then you want as much rend on target as possible as well. But you can't really control rend as much. So it's just like these other things matter more. There's also like an armor factor in this, which is why Pen Backstab is picking up speed, especially for Spear, because it will decrease the armor and it will allow you to kind of take advantage of that compounding a little bit more. But yeah, it's always about just maximizing every single category because they're all going to compound. You're going to end up with a little bit more damage than if you were to all in on one category. So a lot of these things that are like, you gain more of this, but you lose some of this is like generally not worth it, especially when it expires 200% faster. Like that's a really big deal unless you have passive empowers. But the gravity gauntlets, I just don't think these are going to be used that much. Like this is a 2. This I think is going to be experimented enough where I'd say it's a 3. This is a 2, this is a 1, this is a 3. Like it's like most of these artifacts are not looking super good, but there's like potential where they could be experimented with. I just don't see it right now. Ironheart, this is a heavy armor. When not in heavy loadout, gain 20% max health. How good is 20% max health is the question. I think 20% max health is pretty good. 20% max health is basically like you have your Amulet armor perk, and then you have 5 times health, right? Like that's 20% max health right there. And you can get that passively by just running this, which I think is solid. Like a lot of times when you look at health, like we're talking about, hey, health is not actually that good because if you get healed for more than the actual health amount, the health didn't really help you there that much. But health does help versus burst. I think this is like a good kind of balance artifact. Like you could go for this. That being said, you also could go for Void Darkplate. If you go for Void Darkplate, you're going to be taking roughly like a 3 to 4% less damage per hit versus 20% more max health. It might be a little bit more than that for Void Darkplate. I think it might be closer to 5% for a lot of these builds. So you have to compare 5% versus 20% max health. And which one would you rather have? Like, I think the 20% is a little bit more impactful for a lot of players than the 5%. So I could see this actually being used a decent amount. And then people could, in theory, open up that Amulet slot for something else, open up the 5 gear slots that you're using for health if you're still using health for something else. So I could see this being used actually a decent amount. Takes a 20k health bruiser to 24k. Yeah, it's like stuff like that. Like that's a very significant jump. Like you take a tank, you tank, oh my god, you take a tank like me that's running like 28k HP, you gain 20% more max health. Like that's a huge deal. I could be sitting at like maybe like 33 to 35% max health. Like that's crazy. Or 33 to 35k max health. That's like actually like kind of nuts and scary to deal with. But it's like, at what point is that health more helpful than Void Darkplate? And that's the part that I don't really know. In spots where it's not a super heal intensive game mode, I would imagine that this would be better. And in spots where you tend to get more heals, I imagine this would be worse. So it just depends if you're more focused on mitigating all that damage or being able to live large burst situations. If you're worried about large burst situations, this will help you more, but you will require more heals to be kept up with this kind of artifact. So I think this is actually like basically a 4, maybe even a 5. Like this is between a 4 to a 5. I'd probably give it like a 4.5. Like I don't know if it's necessarily meta defining, but it's like it's very, very good. I'll just give it a 4 for now and be a little conservative. But like that's like the best artifact here so far, and it's not like really that close compared to anything else. So, Creed boots. This is light armor. It has ambush. Deal 15%. More damage. Yeah, it takes you from 20k health to 24k health as a bruiser. Yeah, it's like absolutely nuts. Spear should be 1. I'm only giving it a 2 because he can go for Coupe de Grace and he could troll someone, but yeah, it's not going to be used that much. You're generous to that too. Yeah, it's probably going to get downgraded to 2 at some point, or to 1 at some point. Creed boots, light footwear, ambush, deal 15% more damage, 25 increased hit chance as long as you haven't hit a target within 20 seconds. Problem is, if you want to kill someone, you're going to hit them a lot. And just off of that alone, I think this is a pass. I think this is like between a 2 and a 1. I think it will be experimented with a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be used at all. I'll probably give this a 1. Honestly, we could probably downgrade the spear to a 1 at this point. Like, there's just better spears to go for. Like, you're going to go for a Scorpion Sting or a normal spear. Both of those are better than Venom. Phoenix, this is an amulet that is really interesting. It has Phoenix Revival. When you receive lethal damage, avoid death and become invulnerable for 2 seconds. Has a 180-second cooldown, so that's a 3-minute cooldown there for passive old Defy death. Is that really good? Yeah, I think that's good enough to be meta for most healers. Like, I don't see a reason to, like, not run it as a healer. As a tank player, this is interesting too, and as a player that plays on point, in situations where there's a large amount of burst, immunity is pretty nice, but the problem is it can get stripped by Oblivion instantly. So, like, within OPR, I think this is meta-defining. Within War, I think this is going to be overhyped at first, and then I think this is going to be scaled back. So I think that this artifact is actually going to be used a lot, basically as a almost auto-include for a lot of healer builds. I don't really see a reason to not run it. It has Stand plus Purify too, which is an illegal combo. Yeah, it's pretty good. Like, if you like to have both of those. Purify basically is an extra life from a point tank perspective, but I think this is going to be used for healer. I think it's going to be used for tank. I don't think it's going to be used for bruiser. I don't think it's going to be used for IGVG. Like, it's not going to be used for every single build, but it's meta-defining on a few builds. This Ironheart, like, I think it's going to be contested a lot. Like, this is very, very viable, but there's often, like, artifacts that most builds would rather run over that, but it's still a very, very good artifact. It's already overhyped. I mean, it's hyped up a lot, but, like, if you can't kill a healer for 2 seconds, the question is, like, what does invulnerable mean? If invulnerable means that you can't take any damage for 2 seconds whatsoever, then this is 5-star easily. If the invulnerable means that you can't be killed, but you can take damage, this is probably a 4 to 3-star. The reason being is if you are completely immune to damage, you can just be healed up to full in those 2 seconds, and then you're just good to go, and you're just not going to die. If you will just be kept at 1 HP, and then someone drops an Oblivion on you and you die, like, that's a very, very big difference. So it should work like the Hatchet did. That's what I would imagine. If it works like the Hatchet did, like, I would probably downgrade this from a 5 to, like, between a 4 and a 3. Like, it would be between those two if it works like what Hatchet did. But if it works like a complete immunity, like, if invulnerable basically means immunity for 2 seconds, then now it's a 5. So it's like, it kind of flip-flops there. I think no matter what, it's going to be used for healer, because there's just no reason really not to run it. And I think for a lot of kill squad players, it's going to be used a lot too. Just because you have other options, but, like, they don't have as significant as an impact as this amulet will have. So, like, I think this is going to be viable. I'm a little bit more than viable, and I'm kind of excited to look at that. In terms of, like, some of the artwork, we kind of skipped around a bit. This is the ambush piece, has Refreshing and Freedom. It has Defile on there, so again, a little bit of a damage boost. If that's a perk that you can't normally get, but I don't think that's good enough. We have Gilly's Grav Gauntlets. This is the one that has Charged, again has Defile, and it's the one that you'll get, oh, it does say Empower on there even. Okay, so it didn't say Empower in the notes, but it says Empower on the tooltip. So like we kind of discussed, like, that's probably not going to be good because Empower is not as good of a buff to get compared to base damage. And you're just unlikely to be able to kind of use this too much unless it works off every single tick of, like, Ice Shower and Ice Storm and Oblivion and, like, all those effects and, like, dot effects. Like, then it might actually be decent, but it basically just comes down to, does this work off of dots? If it does proc off of dots, it'll be good, but I have the feeling it will not. Did he notice that these artifacts have no upgrade perk? The upgrade perk is Defile. You can change the Defile out, but Defile is decent. Defile might be filler there, so you might not see Defile in PTR. Yeah, I believe what I've been told is Defile is the upgrade perk on all of these, so you can change out the Defile, but you can't change out anything else. But I haven't watched the dev video yet, and I want to get into that. But I don't know if that would be like right now or if it would be after the next war. In terms of the other artifact that we have, Phoenix, this is the one that we've talked about a bit that's really, really interesting because you have this Phoenix Revival. So you have 3 conditionals, right? You have 3 times you have to keep track of. You have your Purify, you have your Stam Recovery, and then you have your Revive, basically. And all of these will keep you alive for a bit. So your health bar, like if this is your health bar and you're losing health, like your health is going to get to half HP, you're going to get Purified, and it's just going to jump up to full. Then your health bar is going to, and then at the same time, you're going to have Stam Recovery proc, right? And you're going to be able to triple dodge. You're likely going to get up to full. Your health bar goes down to half HP again, like 30 seconds later. You're probably going to get up a little bit because you have the Stam Recovery. Like, you just have, like, ways to play around that. That's, like, really stupid. By the time you actually get to the point where you're going to die, like, you just get immunity, and then you could either get healed up to full, or you will get healed up partially. The interesting part here will be, do healers want to pump you with resources if you're just going to die in 2 seconds anyway? Or do healers just say, hey, this guy's going to die in 2 seconds anyway, I do not care? That's where I'm like talking about, like, is invulnerable immunity or is invulnerable what the hatchet was, where you're just going to be left at 1 HP? Because it's, if you're left at 1 HP, like, this is not good for a lot of builds. Like, you can't use this because you're just going to be stuck in a clump and you're just going to die again in 1 and 2 seconds later. But if it's like a super clump fight where people are just nuking the clump and then they're declumping and nuking the clump and declumping, this will keep you alive. So it's like, it's a very bipolarizing artifact. This is either going to be like a 5-star artifact or it's going to be a 3-star, and there's not much of an in-between. I think no matter what, healers will likely pick up this artifact just because it looks good for them. Just a busted jail card amulet. Yeah, it's just like passive hatchet. Like, that's crazy. Like, to even think about that they gave that, but like, the hatchet stuff was only good if you're able to live, right? Like, if you're just left at 1 HP and you don't gain a heal with the hatchet stuff, like, is that really that helpful? Like, that's the part where I don't know if I'm completely sold on it. This also has really good synergy with the hatchet too now, because the hatchet doesn't have the invulnerable, but it gives you a little bit of a heal. So you can go down to 1 HP or whatever. You're going to cleanse all your debuffs because of the hatchet passive, and then you're going to get healed up a bit. So it's like, there's a lot of weird synergies with this that I like. But I just don't know, like, what invulnerable means. I was looking forward to the Stam earring, but it doesn't seem like we're getting it. Yeah, I was really looking forward to Ocean's Peace, so I guess we're not getting that, and I'm upset because I really wanted Ocean's Peace. Or also, Mastermind was not revealed here either. Mastermind was a ring that basically gave you more damage on your abilities at a cost of less damage for your autos. That was leaked a few PTR sessions ago. And then we have the earring with the one that gave you a passive 2% health per second, gave you 2 mana, gave you 2 stam per second at the cost of your pots being increased by 75% cooldown wise. I forget if that was all pots or just health pots. If that doesn't apply to Cleanse Potion, that actually might be really good in war as well. Good Master Guide would be hard for a game. Yeah, I mean, like, if you're a Fire Staff player, like, say you're running Fire Staff BB still, would you rather use Phoenix and just be immune for a few seconds, or would you rather just deal 10% damage in every single fire or flame, or what do you call it, flamethrower tick? Like, I think I would rather do the flamethrower tick, but Mastermind is just like generally looks kind of scary. I think this Phoenix thing is going to break the game somewhat though. The one that's like really sleeper though that I don't think anyone's like really talking about is this Ironheart. Like, Ironheart is like really good. Like, you can't be in heavy, which is the only con, but if you're like a medium player, 20% more health is like very solid. Like, it's like borderline, like, can push medium. You can't run this in light either, right? Because you can't do light with a heavy legs, like, that just doesn't work. So this is a medium only artifact, but like, Ironheart looks really interesting as well. I expect that to be considered by disruptors. I expect that to be considered for maybe even bruisers in some situations, but I think most of them are going to prefer Tumblr Feet route. But it's just like a very interesting